Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. Kevin McCullough, very glad to have you with us. There are a handful of people. In fact, I get asked this question regularly. Kev, if you were to have dinner with 5 human beings and you could pick them from anywhere in history, who would you pick? And it's changed from time to time. Oftentimes, Winston Churchill is included in my list. Other historical figures, I would love to have dinner with Jesus Christ. He's my Lord and Savior. It would be awesome to sit and dine with him. But in modern eras, there have been people that have stood up courageously for things that they believe in. And my next guest is someone that I believe fits that description. In fact, I think when this period of history is going to be written, she's going to be talked about for doing something rather heroic. And that was to say, enough is enough. Men and women are different. We are created that way by our Creator, and it's not wrong to say that. Her name is Riley Gaines, and she was a championship-level swimmer for the University of Kentucky until she had a championship wrongfully taken from her. She now joins us. Riley, thanks for being here. My listeners have known of your story since the very beginning. In fact, before your story, we were tracking with the Connecticut girls track athletes that were losing scholarships in Connecticut high school opportunities, and then there were girls that were losing places on their softball teams in Southern California at high schools because boys identified as girls and they wanted to play and they couldn't cut it on the varsity baseball team, so they went and played softball. And then came the swimming, the year of swimming with NCAA and Leah Thomas, and you entered that story towards the end of that season when really I think something just dreadfully unjust happened. For the sake of my listeners, can you recap that story for us? We've never heard it from your lips.
Absolutely. And first, let me just tell you how thrilled I am to be on with you. I know you've had some of my teammates and now even some of my colleagues on your show before to talk about this. And really, you were one of the first, before it had become an issue that was overly politicized in the way that it was, and even some people, even some elected officials with R's by their names were scared to talk about this. There you were, and so I just wanted to take the time to thank you for highlighting the absurdity, like you said, that this country has been plagued with, really. But yes, let me just give a very brief background on me. Never a position I wanted to be in, let me tell you that. This is never where I saw myself. This is not the plans that I made for me. But of course, the quickest way to make God laugh in your face is to make plans for yourself. He very clearly had different plans for me.
He has a sense of humor that way sometimes, yes.
I know, I'm learning every day. But my senior year, I was, we were geared up, ready to go to our national championships. But about 3 weeks before, the NCAA announced that Leah Thomas, who is of course actually Will Thomas, who swam 3 years on the men's team as a mediocre, really as a less than mediocre male swimmer, decided to switch to the women's team where he would ultimately then win a national title at this same NCAA championships. He and I raced each other in the 200 free, which almost impossibly enough resulted in a tie, meaning that we went the exact same time down to the 100th of a second. But to answer your question of, I guess, how I found myself here, what really thrusted me over the edge into no longer being willing to wait for someone else to say something, because that's what I was doing, really, truthfully, was after we tied, we go back behind the awards podium where the NCAA official looks at both Thomas and myself, again, him towering over me. And the official says, "Great job, you two, but you tied, and we don't account for ties. We only have one trophy, and we're going to give that trophy to Leah. Sorry, Riley, you don't get one." And that was it. That was the moment when, that was the pivotal point where I had, like you said, I mean, enough is enough. Reducing everything we had worked our entire lives for down to a photo op to validate the feelings and the identity of a man. That's when I just wasn't willing to lie anymore. Yeah.
Well, and there's multiple ways that this is unjust, and there's obviously the issues of having to change and be around one another in a disclothed kind of way. That I think, and people will have different opinions about that, but I just think that there's no room for that morally in our culture, especially when we are dealing with sexual assault and sex crimes to the degree that we are. And we've worked so hard to try to make our daughters and wives feel safe. I'm the father of a young lady that is coming up, and she's going to have reasons to want to compete and so forth. I want her to have safe places to be when she is in those circumstances. But that aside, the biology of this, if people didn't know about Leah Thomas, he was enormously tall. I think he was 6'4". I think he was close to the same height that Michael Phelps was. He had a wingspan that was twice or three times what most of the girls were that he was competing against. And in terms of leverage, when you're talking about propelling a body through water, it's all based on muscle. It's all based on ability. And his bone structure and his muscles were just he was a different species almost. Yes, he was a human being, but he did not belong in the pool with those of you that had been, as females working towards this goal. Did the NC2A, did any of the colleges, did anybody that you were speaking to acknowledge the biological difference?
Not at any point. At any point over the time that, of course, when Thomas was allowed to start competing, when most of the country found out about Thomas at that national championships, or even since in the 2 years following, at no point has the NCAA, I guess, really even individual universities, we have an entire political party, at least in terms of elected representation, who has at no point acknowledged the very real biological differences that exist between men and women.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you described, of course, there's things like wingspan and height, but even things like, it sounds so silly when you say it out loud, but even things like throat size. Men on average have a 40% larger throat. That's a huge advantage when you're playing a sport where you're grasping for air. Of course, his lungs were larger. He had a larger lung capacity. His heart size was bigger. All of these things are crucial to success in our sport, a sport where we work years and years to shave off hundredths of a second, right? Yeah. There's not a lot of wiggle room here, and we're competing against someone who no amount of training, no diet, no sleep schedule, no nothing you can do can overcome the differences that exist.
And you excelled in your sport. You were one of the top in the country. In fact, had he not been in that race, wouldn't the time that you tied him with, wouldn't that have set a record for the 200 or come close to it?
Yeah. It was certainly within my, I mean, I'm an SEC record holder, 5-time SEC champion, 2-time Olympic trial qualifier.
It's like, and I remember hearing you before Congress say that your husband was also a pretty good swimmer, didn't win any medals, didn't do any of the stuff that you accomplished, and that on any day of the week he could kick your butt in a race. What you were pointing out was that these differences matter. And the reason that Title IX exists, the reason that we've set up women's sports, the reason that girls need that space is because there's so much good that comes into their lives when they are able to excel and have that opportunity.